That's my son and I do it.
Yeah, so this-
Does it
You
bother
want your
you?
glasses on?
If you can manage without them on, then
Does it
because we're
bother
just gonna be
you?
talking anyways.
I don't remember you with glasses at all.
You don't know. There you go.
Mine will be glaring.
And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna have Martha go over there, and she's gonna say, today is da 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 da. We're here for Termite Terrace and
Other tuneries.
the other tuneries, and we're here to interview. You know,
I'm
your
left-handed, if you'd like to be on this side.
okay, so and so and so and so. You know,
Do you
just
want me to sit down too, or do you want me to just stand here?
well, I want to see you. You have to sit down. So
Down here.
Yeah, she's just gonna introduce you, that's all she's gonna do. Then she's gonna leave.
okay, ready?
Hi, I'm Martha Siegel, and we're continuing with Termite Terrace and other tuneries. Today is November 20th, 1998, and we have with us Art Leonardi and Joe Siracusa. Hi, and all the students want to hear all about your life story in the cartoon business and other things.
I was never in the cartoon business.
Okay,
Oh, yes, I was. Just kidding.
here we go.
It comes back to you now.
Yeah, it's come back to me. Well, you know, we're that age now.
Yeah, I know.
We
Only
forget
too
things.
well.
We forget things.
We have to tell them everything?
Not everything.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Well,
okay.
we'll make up some things too.
The mustache is okay, get your mustache straight,
Yeah.
okay?
They were slowly getting to look alike, the same forehead, paisanos.
All we need is a bowl of spaghetti here, and we got it made.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
How did you get in the business, Joe?
Well, I was a musician, entertainer with the Spike Jones Band. And most of my work with Spike was working with sound effects. And Spike always said I thought in cartoon terms. I used to build props for Spike. I had the gentleman's trousers would go up and down when he played the trombone. Bubbles would come out of the tuba. The things would fall out of the clarinet. And then I did a one-man band thing. And I used to do the two-headed bit. And the two-headed bit was great because it started off just Spike wanted to do something different. So Earl Bennett, who eventually came to work with us at the studio, was Sir Frederick Gass with Spike. And Earl's a fine artist, so he made a papier-mâché duplicate of my head. But what a job. And so we would do the first half of the show, then the second half would open up, the curtain would open up, and I'd be sitting up there with two heads on it. He made the head and we put it on a pair of shoulder pads. So I'd be sitting there playing the drums and the two heads, and you hear the people say, back there, what's that? And all Spike would say, he said, I was going to hire a drummer with three heads, but no one would believe it. And that was the end of the gag. But I couldn't let it stop at that. So we had our prop man used to carry his own tool chest with him. So when we were in San Francisco, I took the head down to the basement. I drilled a hole in the mouth. I inserted a rubber tube under the head, out to the mouth, into my pocket with a bulb syringe, and I would put powder in the tube. And I didn't tell this to Spike or anybody in the band. I just waited. So here I am with two heads, and Spike says, and here's the drummer with two heads. So I stand up, and Spike's looking at me, and I don't smoke, but I stood up and I had a cigarette in my hand, so I reach over, I take a drag on the cigarette, and the smoke came out of the other head, because I'm out of the other head.
That's funny,
Then I reach over, and meantime I kept the smoke here, then I take the drag on this head and blow smoke out of this head. Then I had it all figured out with my friend Roger Donnelly, my buddy, the bass player. I said, and now the hard way. I take a drag on the cigarette, he'd stand up and blow the smoke out of his head. But my point is, these are visual gags. I always thought in terms of visual gags. And we had a string bass that we played string bass. You hear somebody knocking, you turn around, and the midget came out of the back of the string bass, walk out of the back of the string bass. So Spike always said, someday, you'll be working at. He said you'll be working at Walt Disney. Well, one of those things. So anyway, we did an album with Spike called "How the Circus Learned to Smile," and it was a story of a circus clown and who went around and teach all the animals and people how to smile. And he would walk, and Spike asked me to do all the sound effects. So I had to create a sound image for the clown with his squeaking, so he'd go with his shoes. And then we had the seal. He had taught the seals how to smile, and it was a great. I'm trying to think of the great animation director that wrote it, and I'll think about it in a moment. But it to me, it was a perfect thing for a cartoon, a perfect vehicle for a cartoon. So my friend Herb Klin was working at UPA Pictures. So I got Spike to meet with Steve Vasusto and talk about doing this cartoon. But it was a one-upmanship. Steve wanted upstage Spike, Spike went upstage Steve. So it just didn't work out. But in the meantime, I knew Herb, I met Bo Cannon, I met Teehee, and a lot of people there. So that's one aside. So later on, they were to do a film at UPA called The Oompas. Bo Cannon produced it, about the story of a young man who was a trumpet. His mother was a French horn, his father was a tuba. And so they wanted a Dixieland jazz soundtrack for it. So they called me, asked me if I could do it. Well, I'm not an arranger, but I said, I just happen to know a young man who could do it. And here again is another story in my life called What Are the Odds? Shall I go back and see how this all started? I was in the Army, World War II. I was at in Galveston, Texas, and I was in a regular outfit, but as a musician, they allowed me to play with a band at night. And in that band, they had a piano player that I worked with very well, and I was from Cleveland, Ohio, and this young man was from California, in some funny little town in California called Tarzana. So, anyway, Ray Sherman, this is Ray Sherman, and I got together, and we got to be very good friends. After the war, I went back to Cleveland, Ray went to Tarzana, and I didn't see him for a while. So, when I came out to California with Spike, I live out here, and my son started going to Taft High School, and there was a young lady at Taft High School, Ray Sherman's daughter, and I knew Ray was playing out here, and I got together with Ray Sherman, and we did some dates together. So when they asked for a musician at UPA, I said, I have just a man for you. So I called Ray Sherman in, and he wrote the score to the Oompas. And I was the translator between the musicians and the animators. And that was my first introduction to animation. So Bo and T, who were doing the film, were impressed with what I did, whatever it was. And they said, gee, someday, Joe, we'd like to have you work for us. I said, well, someday. But, no. So that was my introduction to animation. So then, later on, I was with Spike at the 1952, and in 1952, my son Jim was born. He was the third of our 3 children. And I've been on the road with Spike all these years, 6 years, and I really didn't have any family. So they offered me a job at UPA Pictures to go in as an apprentice film editor. Oh. So I said, well, I went to Spike, and I told him, and I'll tell you, literally, I was on the phone. I couldn't talk to him in person. I was on the phone. I was crying. I said, Spike, I said, I got this offer for a job, in the studios. I said, and my son was just born, and I said, I'm thinking of leaving. And he says, Joe, he said, you can't do that. I said, you can't do that. Spike and I were very, very close. So he says, go talk to my manager, Ralph Wonders. He says, he can, because I said I have to join the union. I have a chance to get into the film locals, and it happens once in a lifetime. He said, well, you talk to my manager. He'll maybe you can do another tour, then he'll get you back in the union and all that. So I went to the Spike's manager, Ralph Wonders, who was not the most kind-hearted man in the world, typical manager, agent. So I said, I had this offer. I said, and Spike, wanted me to say. So Ralph says, oh, he says, drummers I can get drummers. There are a dime a dozen. He says, I can get another drummer to replace you. So he relieved me of all, my consciousness. So I said, fine, thank you very much. And I left the band, and I joined the studio. And Spike and I still kept our relationship. I still wrote for him and wrote gags for him, but I wasn't with the band. So now I'm at UPA Pictures, and I'm working with Ted Baker, Ted Seaburn, and I came in and I started working at, I work 4 hours a day, and 20 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week. I was learning the business. And with my musical background, they let me work with music. With my sound effects background, I started recording sound effects for them. And in 2 years, I was a supervising film editor there, because Ted Baker left, Ted Seaburn left, and I inherited the job. And I was so blessed to be able to, in that time, to get my friend Roger Donnelly, who was the bass player with Spike, wanted to leave too. So I asked Roger if he'd like to join the studio, in my department. So I got Roger Donnelly, a bass player, and my friend Earl Bennett, who was Sir Frederick Gass with Spike Jones, wanted to leave, and we offered him a job. He came in, and Skip Craig, who had been the band boy with the show, and a very hard worker, wanted to quit. So we got Skip in. So this is my department. Most of my department was the guys from the Spike Jones band. And we started doing recording sound effects and doing effects for pictures. In fact, we did a Mr. Magoo film when the musicians were on strike. Mr. Petrillo had called a musicians strike to try and get more money. And the film had to be finished, and we had no music for it. So the four of us got together, and what we did, we created loops of sounds. Another loop. We had 4 loops, and we would intermix those loops and use them like music. And we did a Mr. Magoo film with the loops for the music track of this Magoo film. So this was a departure. And see, we didn't know limitations. We had no limitations about thinking. We just did what we wanted and fit it into the film mode. So it was an exciting time for me to work with at UPA Pictures, and we did the Magoo series. We did the Gerald McBourne one. We met Dr. Seuss. We had the best talent available. I don't have to go down the list with the UPA people. You know, with T.E. and Bo Cannon and Pete Burness and Rudy LaRiva. I could go right down the line. But to me, it was an education and a great experience. And that's also how I got in the restaurant business. My wife and I used to take food down to the restaurant. I mean, from our home rather. We didn't have a restaurant. We'd take food from our home down to parties at the studio, and they'd have people like James Mason, you know, did the Telltale Heart. He was there as one of the guests, and Jim Backus, my friend, another friend from Cleveland, and all these great art talents would come to these parties. And my friend Ted Baker said, "Gee, Joe, you know, you should open a restaurant." So me, you know, stupid me, I didn't think, oh, I should open a restaurant. So we went to the trouble. We bought a building in Van Nuys, and the idea was my brother was going to come out from Cleveland with his wife. They would run the restaurant, and I would do the publicity and promotional stuff. So we bought the building, got the license and the whole bit, and my brother and his wife decided they couldn't come out for whatever reasons, but I won't go into. So here we are with a building now for the restaurant. Now what do we do? So the guys, I had certain ideas of the way I wanted to design it. So the guys from the studio came out, and this was a home, a regular home, and we renovated it into a restaurant. And the guys from the studio came in, they painted all the walls to make it look like used brick. We had the pizza counter to look like somebody's back porch, and we even laid the cement on the building, on the ground under the building, with the directors from the studio mixing the cement and carrying it down. And Steve Bassesto said, "I wish I could get my guys that work for me for money like they work for you for free." But we opened the restaurant, and we were having a hard time financially between the building and the equipment and the supplies, and we were running low of cash. So Jack Eckes and Ted Baker went to the guys at UPA Pictures, and they sold them tickets for opening night at the Meatball Manor. That was the name of our restaurant, Meatball Manor, in Panorama City. So they sold tickets for opening night. So we finally got the restaurant open, and opening night they came in and we made special pizzas for everybody. They helped themselves to the coffee. We had the music. We had the player piano, and the guys would come in and play the piano, and it was great. That was opening. That was UPA night, and so then now we're in business. But now every night after work, I'd come home, I'd kiss my wife, put on the apron, and start making pizzas. And those days, you made the pizza by hand. And my wife would make the lasagna and the spaghetti and the sauce, and I made the pizza and the garlic bread and that stuff. And my two compadres that really came in, and they were the waiters. And they were fun. They served people, and they put the food down, and then sit down and eat it with them, you know. And then I had my cowbells, which I'll play for you in a minute, up on my counter. I make the pizza, and I go, bop, bop, bop. Okay, they probably want the pizza to go. That's what they want. Now, see if they want the pizza to go. And I would play my cowbells. Come and get your pizza, and that's when the waiter would come and get the pizza. And we would go out and play songs on the pizza paddle, and the skillet like we were playing, playing guitars and bands and sing phony lyrics, And then, so we were doing cartoon type gags in the restaurant. And I had a bit where I used to get the pizza in a ball and the pizza dough, and then roll it out on the like that with my hand, like I played the drums. So I would call it substitution, and my friend Frank would come in, and he would start with the ball. In the meantime, I would hide behind the counter this way. So he'd take the pizza ball, the dough, throw it in the air, and he'd come down, and I'd catch it, and down here, and throw it again like it bounced on the floor. And that's the way you entertain the people that way. I didn't know you were supposed to make money there. I thought you were supposed to have fun. But my point is, we still thought in cartoon terms. Well, eventually we had to give the restaurant up. It was just too much work, and but it was an extension of what I was doing in the studio, and the people loved it. And they were just so supportive. So my days at UPA were just delightfully happy days, and it was the start of whatever I did in film work.
Fabulous.
But it was a fun time.
What a great,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on, Art.
No, he wants to play some stuff yet.
Oh no, I'll do that later
Huh?
when we do the sound effects and stuff.
go ahead, Art.
Was that a call
Oh,
from you,
just,
Art?
no, no one answered.
Oh.
Oh,
No,
we get a lot of
I get
those.
that. I get that once in a while. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay, just coming in to say hello.
How's your maestro?
Yeah, it's nothing. Really.
We transfer you now to Carnegie Hall in New
Yes,
York.
right. No, I picked this up from Henny Youngman.
Oh.
He was out,
Oh,
he left
okay.
this for me.
Oh,
And
okay.
Pick up
that
some
was
of his jokes,
gimmick,
too?
Yeah.
But he's always fiddling around anyway, this guy.
Yeah, just fiddling around. Yeah. But,
How did you get in the business, Art?
First of all, I want to say, he just told my whole story. That was my story. We got it mixed up.
Well, that's where the restaurant came from. We know how you
Right.
these Italians are. Oh, God.
Well, enough of this violin. That didn't work anyway. Well, how did I get in the business? Well, I always wanted to get into cartoons, and like I said, all the kids now. What? Louder. Okay. They said to say it louder. Now lower? Higher? Lower. Okay. Okay. Is this high enough?
High enough.
This is the old joke.
Yeah, I know.
But we won't go into that joke. Well, I always wanted to get into cartoons, and I started in doing, first of all, I'm stammering and studying here. First I started at MGM in the live action, in sets and things like that.
What were you doing in art before that? You said you always wanted to...
Well, I was just always drawing cartoons, mostly in the men's room. But,
Most.
In,
and I got caught, so that ended that career. But I left my number, so they call me for doing artwork. No, that's not the way it went. No, no, all through school. I'll go way back.
yeah, that's how you got your art.
Yeah.
How you get started with artwork.
Well, in school, first of all, the kids shouldn't give up on doing the cartoons if that's what they want to do. But my art teacher years ago said, you'll never make money doing cartoons. And so I would draw cartoons in the classroom, and all the kids would come to me for corrections on their artwork instead of going to the teacher. And so she got very angry at me and gave me D's in art. And we had a school teacher across the hall, another art teacher, and she would never know what to give anyone. So she would say, what did you give so-and-so? Well, I gave him a D. Okay, I'll give him a D. So I got D's all the way through high school in art until we got a substitute teacher who let me start a cartoon paper, and from then on I got A's. And then when the other teacher came back, she said, well, he got an A, I better give him an A. So and the other one says, well, what did you give him? An A? Okay, I'll give him an A.
That's one
So,
way to do it.
yeah, anyway, but all through school, I always wanted to do cartoons, and I went into, like I said, live action and MGM, and MGM cartoon department was on the lot 2. And so I drew some cartoons, and Tom and Jerry and things, and I went over to see Bill and Joe over there to show my drawings. And they said, well, we don't need anybody right now. So I was crushed. I left. And then I went from live action, I left there, went into comic books, and then eventually I got to Warner Bros. And was animating there, and then I met Joe again, and Bill, and says, here, it's funny, a small world in the business, is that I was crushed, I only went once, and it deflated me. And that's what the young kids shouldn't do. They should just keep going back, and persisting in what they want to do. At the time, I may have been working for him for years if I had gone back and just pushed more. But being young, I just gave up. And eventually, I'm in his office sitting, and I told him that story to Bill Hanna. I said, you know, it's funny. I came to you for a job years ago, and you kicked me out, and here I am now sitting directing on the show for you. So that's how close it is. But the way I got into, when I went from comic books, and that's a cute, funny little story, I say, oh, I'm in the big time now, I'm in comic books.
Yeah.
So I was doing, getting a small salary, and I was in the bullpen. So and I got good experience in there, is that they would bring in comic book panels from different artists, and then I would have to, they'd say, well, Art, he left the panel out, or we want to add a panel. I would mimic the guy's style and put it in. Whatever the artist was, I would make my style fit that. So it was a good training process. And so I'd go in and ask for a raise, they'd give me a raise. I'd go for another raise, they'd give me another raise. And I'd go, boy, I'm really making out here. Until I found out the girl that delivers the mail was making more than any of us. And then when I went to get unemployment, that was more than what I was making. So that's how low it was.
Didn't somebody tell you originally that you don't make money in cartoons?
That's right, and I didn't. So then, at the time, I was working for Chuck McKimson. Bob McKimson, great director. His brother was in charge of the comics, the Dell Publishing Company. So I came out one day and he says, anybody here bowl? I said, yeah, I bowl. He said, well, my brother's looking for a partner on his team. So that's how I went to bowl with Bob McKimson, and this is strange how it just comes out of the blue. I started doing little cartoons for him while we were bowling, and one day he says, hey, I like the cartoon, why don't you come and work for me? And so I said, okay. So I went over and I worked with him in his unit. And shortly after that, Fritz Freeling wanted me in his unit, so I transferred. And everyone was saying, oh, great, you're in Fritz Freeling's unit. And I said, oh, great. I didn't get any more money.
About what year was this?
That was 59, around that time. I started in 57 at Warner's. You know, I was an in-betweener, and you went through the ranks at that time. Nowadays, if someone decides you're going to be a director, they just make you a director all of a sudden with no training. I've heard so many stories in the business now where they'll hire some young kid that doesn't know anything about timing, nothing about animation, none of the basics, and they make him in charge of someone. And to relate a story, a timer, it does sheets, it's when you do exposure sheets, according to the board, you slug the board and time it. He says, this fellow, I'm working for him and he doesn't know anything. And you know, I'm trying to make this thing work for him and he doesn't know anything about timing. So I digress there that the best way to do is train yourself, go to classes. The union has classes where you can learn storyboarding, layout, and all these different things. And at the same time, by taking these classes, which are very minimal in cost, you'll get to meet people in the business. And like I met Bob McKimson, someone may take a liking to your drawings or whatever you're doing, and may invite you to come to work for them. So that's a good place to start in that area. When I was working at Warner Brothers, we had different units, Frizz and Chuck and Bob McKimson. And Chuck's cartoons were well liked in New York, more sophisticated. Frizz Freeling's was on the West Coast, and it was more funny gags, really funny stuff. And Bob McKimson was Midwest. He was the Farm Belt. That was where his stuff was liked. What was I saying? I forgot what I was saying. No. All right, so when I worked there, when you first started in the business, you had to be an in-betweener, where you took a scene that was brought down to a room, and it was like a bullpen again, and you would just drawing number 2 between 1 and 3, number 4 between 3 and 5, and on a light board. And that's where you started the training to learn how to draw the characters. Then after that, you became an assistant, where you worked with an animator, and he would give you a scene which had rough drawings, number 1, number 9, number 15, or whatever, and then he'd give you a rough indication on a couple of the in-betweens between there of a hand attitude or something like that, and then you would do the breakdowns. Then that would go to the in-between, and then you would finish. And one of the funny stories was this German fellow, Kurt, and we were both in-between, and I happened to become an assistant before he did, and he was angry. So I was working for this animator, and Tom Ray, and we teamed up. An animator would be in a room with your assistant. Okay, so one day Kirk comes up to me and says, I said, what is it? And he says, you made a big mistake on the scene that I have worked on. And I said, well, what did I do wrong? He says, you had your numbers out of order on the exposure sheet. Now, in the exposure sheets, when you have an action where maybe there's a vibration, you go from 9, 1, 8, 2, 7, and like this. So there was an action that Tom Ray had indicated on the chart, and the numbers were all out of sequence, according to the animation. So Kirk thought he caught me in a big mistake. You know, I was stupid, I caught you, but I corrected it. And Tom Ray's listening to this. He says, I said, well, how'd you correct it? He says, I erased all your numbers on the exposure sheet, and I put them in order. He was very German. Tom Ray jumped up. He goes, oh my God, because now he's got to redo it, expose it and everything. And into that area, he got so angry, Tom wanted to get some air in the room, and he pushed his hand on a window that you turn a latch, and you push the thing out, the bevel out, and he went to push it, and he slipped, and his hand went right through the glass and cut his artery in his wrist. So it was pretty frightening, and he was bleeding, and I jump up and I grab his wrist to hold it, and we call, to get us to the main lot. We rush to the nurse, and he's sitting there, and he's, blood all over me. He got his hand on my lap all the way to the hospital there on the main lot, and we rush in there. The doctor gets him, and I sit down, and the nurse and the doctor's working on him, and then they look over at me, and they say, you okay? And I said, I'm fine. And it's like this. I must have been white as a piece of paper. And then they go, okay. And then they work on him, and they go, are you okay? Are you okay? Here's Tom bleeding all over the place, and they keep looking at me. Are you okay? And I say, I'm okay. And they put your head between your legs. And anyway, they were concerned about me fainting and falling down and hitting my head. And eventually I had to go back to work, and I had my pants were all full of blood. So they sent me to the proper room, and I came back to work in gray Civil War pants. With the stripes on the side. So
The show must go on?
yeah, the show must go on. But at the studio, nowadays they don't do it as much. We had units where each director had a story man, a layout man, 3 animators, 3 assistants, and that was a unit. And it was like a friendly competition. Frizz and Chuck and Bob and Kimson had units, and everyone tried to do their best and compete against the other units. When I was working at Hanna-Barbera years later, they started up Tiny Toons at Warner Brothers, and they asked me to come on board and to show them how the units worked. So I set up 4 units, and they hired 3 other directors, and they hired their people, and so each one had a unit. We had the friendly competition. Each unit did their best, said, well, we got to do better than the other one. Instead of having a bullpen where all the layouts are done by the bullpen, all the assistant work is done in a bullpen, and everyone looks at the clock and they all leave and they don't care what it comes out to look like. But we all took pride in our unit and our shows that we did. so it made for better material. And Warner Brothers, let's see what about Warner Brothers. We used to, this is not to do that, but we had little entertainments. We would play pitch pennies, and everybody would go out there and pitch pennies against the wall. And or at the coffee break outside, Ken Harris at the time, he worked in Chuck Jones unit. We'd go out there with frisbees and throw them back and forth, and he had a beautiful Thunderbird out there, and he'd see us flipping these things around, and he'd run out and he'd throw his body over his car, sacrifice his body for the sake of the car. He didn't want to get a little ding on his car. One time I played a joke on Holly Pratt, who, by the way, when the Pink Panther started years later after that, Friz Freleng got a call from Blake Edwards to do a character for this movie, The Pink Panther. And at that time, I had left Warner's at 65 and gone to New York for a year. So Friz came up with a rough sketch of the Panther. Holly Pratt was his key layout man. He designed the Panther. So I give him credit for doing the original Panther. They finished the title for the show, which Pratt directed, and it was so successful that United Artists gave them a contract to do some shorts in that. So then they called me in New York and said, Art, we got something going with a new character, come on back. So I just took off from New York, got out of my lease and jumped in and got a car and drove back with kids. And then I was with them for years on that project. Let's see what. So trying to pull out some areas. One time there was a cute thing at background man for Friz's unit. Forgot his name.
Paul Julian?
No, Julian was.
Grib?
I can't think of his name, but it was funny. I'm walking down the hall, and it's almost Christmas, and he peeks out of his room, his background room, and he goes, "Come here, shh, like that." What's the matter? And I said, "God, there's something wrong here." And he's, "Come in my room, come in my room." I go, "Okay." So he gets me in the room, he pushes me back, and he peeks down the hall, shh, and he reaches under his table, pulls out a box of Seeds candy, and says, "Merry Christmas, take one." He was being very selective who got the candy. So I was saying, like, "God, what is this? Wyatt, there's a big secret here." So, I had a chance, and I was afraid maybe I'll take the one he likes.
Did you take the one you like?
Yeah, I took the one I liked.
How did you meet Joe?
Oh, he was panhandling on the corner of,
And he wouldn't give me anything.
yeah, with his instruments.
I thought he was in a parade with his drum.
No, I don't remember when we met. When? It was over at the Patty Freeling.
The Patty Freeling, yeah.
Patty Freeling in the Panther days when.
It's just a natural transition.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we worked together, and we had so much in common as far as sense of humor and playing. He's always come up with these great drawings that would just instill laughter in the place, and that was part of the the charm of being in that group that we had. We would always bring out the humor, make it a humorous situation, which reflected in our work. It wasn't. We weren't serious about it. We were having fun.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest. I miss part of that in what I see in some of the work today. You've got to enjoy your work. You've got to. It's a reflection of our personalities. This guy has a sense of humor. He thinks in cartoon terms every time. And I used to be the same way with sounds and silly little gimmicks. In fact, I was so pleased that they used to call me to story sessions to contribute little ideas. I wasn't an animator, but I'd come up with whatever funny idea, and they would use it. But that's the way we used to do stuff. We would get in these groups, and everyone would contribute. There was no jealousy, it was a happy group of people working.
I have there was snowball sessions. We'd get in the room and we'd kick around ideas. Like Ted Pierce was one of the writers. There was Bob McKimson's writer, and he would get up. Same way with Mike Maltese, who was great. And Mike Maltese had a fun thing. He had a couch in his room, and I'd come in and he'd be sleeping. And I said, "Hey, Mike, were you sleeping?" He goes, "No, I'm not sleeping, I'm thinking." He said, "Being a writer, I can lay down, close my eyes, and I'm thinking of ideas for a script. You know, so if I'm sitting and sleeping, they go, 'Hey, you can't sleep.' I say, 'Well, I'm drawing.' 'No, you're not drawing.' You know, your eyes are closed."
Well, before I forget, I do want to bring in one very important part of my life as far as being in the animation industry. I go back to Cleveland. Now, I was born in Cleveland, Ohio in 1922, and as long as I can remember, the first thing I remember, we had a next door neighbor called Mr. and Mrs. Planitsky and their two sons. We lived in a two-story house here, and they lived in a two-story house over here. And this one of the son, the older son, was doing sign painting, and he would make signs, paint signs, and he's quite an artist. I was always involved in music. My grandfather was a musician, my father was a musician, my brother, so I was always involved in music. And in fact, the conductor maestro of the band lived down the street, and the clarinet player lived on the street here, the bass player lived down there. It was that type of a musical thing. And Mr. Klinitsky, the son, his father was a projectionist, and that was quite in those days, you know, Depression days, that was quite a position. He had the only car in the neighborhood, and a very nice family. So my brother and I got to be friends with the two Klinitsky boys, and the older boy, one time, was creating a puppet show, and we'd go up in his attic, and I'd go up there and we'd help him work the puppets. Excuse me. And the same Mr. Klinitsky, young man, later on went into art school, and I was in music. Then we moved to different neighborhoods, and this Mr. Klinitsky became Mr. Klin, Mr. Herb Klin. And during the war, Herb was in Dayton, Ohio, with Ronald Reagan and the people doing films for the Army, and I was actually in the Army. And so when I auditioned for Spike later on, I had to come to California. I auditioned for Spike in Cleveland, and that is a story of how I got, if you're interested in how I got the job with Spike Jones. I first became associated, remembering Spike Jones when I was in the Army. That was during the time he recorded The Fuhrer's Face. That was his first big number, The Fuhrer's Face. And in the Army post, we used to have speakers, and they would play records all day during our rec time, and they were playing Spike Jones records. And I remember when I was 12 years old, I played the washboard, and I was with a band, an Army band, with Ralph Young, and we were with the Army band. Then we had a dance band, a great dance band, and it was a very straight dance band. And then I got transferred into the dance band, which was another stroke of the Lord working in my life, the way I got transferred out of the Army into a band just by auditioning. And so then we were hearing these Spike Jones records, and I always had this, like Spike said, I always thought cartoon time. So I was with this Army band, and we used to play dances with the Officers Club, and it was a very straight band, and the guys were very, you know, straight and not having fun, and I couldn't understand this. So I took the music library one time, and in those days they didn't have Penthouse magazine or anything like that. They had, they used to call
National Geographic.
Well, yeah, so stuff like that, and those used to have a health magazine, and it showed the people playing volleyball and that type of thing, but nude.
The old sunbathing.
Sunbathing, that's right, sunbathing magazine, something like that. So I took a bunch of these, tore these pages out of this magazine, and I took the music from the library, music library, and in each book, the trumpet players, the saxophone players, I took and I interspersed these pictures, these nude pictures, and you know we'd have the numbers.
And they turn the page.
All the songs are numbered. You know, we'd have numbers 1, 2, 3. All the arrangements are numbered. So one night we're playing at the Officers Club. It was very dull. So I told Ralph. I said, Ralph, why don't you play? Let's play numbers 1, 14, and 28. So he called out, okay, guys, 1, 14, and 28. So they turned to these where I had these pictures, and you see the guys turn to that. And they said, well, Ralph said, what's the matter? He said, oh yeah, okay. So then we started playing and it started getting dull again. I said, Ralph, play number 42. He says, okay, number 42. And they started laughing. And
That's fine.
then, so that's how we got started. So then we did the number with we had a Les Brown library because Ralph had been with Les Brown, and Les Brown let us copy his library. And we used to do the song, "A Good Man Nowadays Is Hard to Find." And Ralph would sing the song. And this was during the time of Frank Sinatra with the girls screaming and hollering. So when Ralph was singing the song, I would sit back in my drums there, and I would put on a mop, like a wig, and Ralph would sing, and I'd do the girl, oh, sing it to me, Ralphie, baby! And I was just doing it to entertain the band. And pretty soon the officers and everything come coming, what's going on here? Because all the laughing. So we had to get organized. So next time we did it, I made signs that applaud, scream, faint, and so he would sing, and I would put out the sign, applaud, and all the people would applaud, and I'd have my wig on, and I'd scream. Then I'd say, scream, we scream, and then I would faint off the bandstand, oh, Frank, oh, Ralphie. And we started doing comedy. So we started to be a comedy band, and I wrote a couple of arrangements. I wrote an arrangement on a pistol packing mama, and I used to come out and sing pistol packing mama, and I would put, in my GI uniform, I put a couple of maracas in my blouse, and I'd sing pistol packing mama, and I'd let go, and let my and they'd fall down, and I'd pick them up again and start singing, and Ralph would come and sing with me and put his hand on my butt, and that's how we started entertaining. We became an entertaining band as opposed to just a dance band. Yeah. And we started getting calls from the Officers Club, from other clubs, from other companies, other like the in Alamogordo, New Mexico. They came and picked us up, our band, and they would come in and feed us and drive us to Alamogordo. We were in Fort Bliss, Texas. They'd drive us to Alamogordo to play for the Officers Club and entertain. And I'll never forget one time, Ted Weems was very popular in those days. He had a big band. Yeah. So Ted Weems was hired for the Officers Club, and we were going to play the NCO Club. And so the officers heard about that. They said, no, they told the manager said, you can take Ted Weems. We want Ralph Young. So Ted Weems came over later to see what we were doing. And just that we were doing these comedy things, and I was taking falls off the bandstand. But that's how I got started entertaining. Now, I get my audition. So now I get home to Cleveland after being in the Army. I get discharged and go back to Cleveland. And while I was in El Paso in the service, I was playing with the El Paso Symphony too. My background is from the concert world. I was brought up in the, my father was a concert musician with the concert bands, and I was being groomed for the Cleveland Symphony. We had what they called the the Cleveland Philharmonic Orchestra, and I was playing kettle drums and timpani in the Philharmonic Orchestra. The next step was going to the symphony, but then we got drafted and things changed. So I was playing in the El Paso Symphony, playing timpani, and playing concert work in the concert band. So I get back to Cleveland now after being discharged from the Army, and I've been having all that fun with Ralph Young, and things were kind of dull. I was going to go back to be a high school music teacher maybe and work in the factory like I did during the war, and I was playing with a little group at night in a little nightclub, and it was pretty dull. And I told my wife, I said, gee, I said, I'm not satisfying my urge. I was playing, they created a symphonic band in Cleveland, and I was hired as the timpanist, but it still wasn't satisfying my creative urges. So again, to me, this is providential. I keep saying the name of my book is going to be What Are the Odds? So here I'm thinking of Spike Jones. I said, wouldn't it be great? The Sunday paper comes, and the rotogravure section, the color section, there's a picture of Spike Jones sitting in a little racing car. He had sponsored a racing car at the Indianapolis races, and it had a picture of Spike Jones sitting in his car, and it said that he was going to be making a picture of Variety Girl at Paramount Pictures in Hollywood, California. That was it. So I said, gee, isn't that great? So I talked to my wife, and she said, well, do something. So I said, okay. So I sat down, and I composed a letter to Spike Jones, care of Paramount Studios, Hollywood, California. I wrote a letter telling him what I had done in the Army and the comedy things I was doing, and that I had played a washboard, and I said, I'm putting this in the form of a wager. I said, I'm willing to bet that I can reproduce 75% of your sound effects, whether they're vocal, mechanical, or musical. And I put that in the letter, and I mailed it to, Paramount Pictures, Hollywood, California, and I forgot about it. Who's gonna, they don't open those letters. Nobody asks. So I forgot about it. A week later, I get a card, a postcard designed by Red Eagle, a caricature of Spike Jones. It says, Dear Joe, got your letter. We'll be playing in Cleveland on June 6th or something. He said, looking forward to seeing and hearing you there. Oh my God, I said, the answer to my letter, you don't care? So I start, thinking of ideas. So now he comes to Cleveland at the Cleveland Palace. And so I took off from work, and my wife and I went to see Spike Jones, and I sent word that I was there. And after the show, they said, like come backstage. So I go backstage, and Spike's standing there. He's drinking iced coffee. He was trying to get away from drinking booze. He's in his costume, getting ready to go on stage. And I said, "Hi, Spike." He said, "You got quite a band you got out there. Is it funny?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "They're great." He says, "Thanks for coming by, Joe." He went on the stage. I said, "Well, that's the way it goes, So I went home. That night, I get a phone call. It says from his secretary. It says, "Joe, I'm sorry. When Spike didn't remember you from your letter, he didn't know who you were when he came. He said, please come back." So now that's the first time I've ever seen the band perform. Was that night with my wife and I there. So the next night I went back with one of my compadres and one of my friends, and we go to see the show. Now I see the show for the second time. Now I go backstage, and there's Spike sitting in a zebra-striped dressing gown on a lounge chair and holding his iced coffee. He said, "Well, Joe, what is it that you do?" Well, I said, I sang the Chic of Araby for him. It's de chique Araby al de women worship me. Oh, you should sit and follow me around. Not bad. Even bites up all the body cheeks. I wish you kissed my rosy cheeks. If that ain't bad, it's thanks to good I found. When I'm laying down to sleep, I'm counting girls that sheep. From my hair, my eyes can't scare them out. Why should I? They're beauties of all races, and some have pretty faces. I'm the chic who knows all about. And he looked at me, yeah. And then he said, "Well, what else you do?" So I said, "Well, your cocktails for two. The ending for cocktail for two." So I did that. I didn't realize there's three guys doing it. I'm doing all three sound effects, And then I just had my picture in the paper, playing the timpani, and I told him about the Les Brown band. And so he calls his drummer over, Bo Lee, who was his manager. He says, "Hey, Bo," he said, "we've got somebody here who can replace Red." I didn't know. Red Engel was his featured comedian. He played the violin, played saxophone, he sang, he did Chloe, and I sang Chloe the whole bit for the audition. So he said, "We have somebody replace Red." So I said, "Well, gee, what do I do now?" He said, "I can't hire you as a drummer because I have a drummer for this tour. We're finishing a tour, and besides that, you don't belong to the Los Angeles local. I have to pay a tax." So I said, "Well, Spike, what if I go out to California? I'll deposit my card in the union. Wait till you get your tour, finish your tour, and we'll finish the audition." He says, "Great." Well, he had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So he said, "Great." So he gave me the name of it. He gave me his home address. And he says, "Go see my wife. Let her know where you're staying. And when I get back to California, we'll talk." So okay, I get all excited. I go home. I told my wife. I went out. I bought a suit. I didn't have a good suit. Bought a suit. I bought a suitcase with my severance pay I got from the army, and I packed up. And so this is the third. So now I call California. I says, where am I staying in California? Well, I had two friends in California. One was Herb Klin, and the other was Paul Bordnero, a saxophone player I've worked with. He and his family were out here. So I called Herb, and he said, "Well, they're just moving to a new house, just got married." He said, "But come and see me anyway." And I called the Bordnero family, and Paul just got married, but his family said, "Come and stay with us." His mother and father were very nice, his mother and father, and his brother and two sisters. So I go out, so I packed my suitcase, and I called, this one you take the train, the El Cap, from Cleveland to Chicago, from Chicago to LA, and then I get off the train, the depot downtown, and my friend Paul owns a bar on 3rd and Main in Los Angeles. So I didn't know, I'm not a drinker, so I get my suitcase, I get off the train, and I'm walking downtown LA, and I see the guys sleeping in the gutter over here, and there's guys floating.
Even in
I
those
said,
days.
"This is LA, this is Los Angeles." So I go to 3rd and Main, where my friend Paul has the Torch Cafe, a joint. It's called the Torch Cafe. So I walk in, and here's all these guys drinking and boozing up, and Paul and his brother owned this place, and his mother and father owned a nicer place in another nicer neighborhood. So I said, "Well, this is LA, okay." So I go home with Paul, and I go and stay with his mother and father in Glendale. And every day I take the red car to come into town, and I spend the time with Paul in the bar. And I said, "What's going to happen here?" I hadn't heard from Spike yet. So Paul and his brother Joe used to work together. So Joe, his mother and father were going on a vacation. So Joe said he'll go take care of their bar if I'll help Paul in this bar, in the Torch Cafe. Now I just got out of service. I was 175 pounds. I used to lift weights, and I was in good shape. So anyway, we get to the. Paul said, Joe, you can help me here. You can be the night manager. Night manager said I had to set the bar up, run the place, take care of all the money, and also keep order in the place. In other words, I was the bouncer. Okay, so I go work there every night, and the good thing is they had a jukebox there. In those days, you put your coin in the jukebox and you could talk to the operator. So I got to know the operator, and forget him.
How'd they get her in that jukebox?
Yeah, that's all.
Ba-dum-bum.
We played short tunes, small tunes. Yeah. So anyway, so I got to know the operator, and I put my money in, and I said, this is Little Joe from the Torch. That was Big Joe. I was Little Joe, and I said, play me a Spike Jones. So they play a Spike Jones record. So when things were quiet, they would play courtesy records for the people. And so when things were quiet and people were using the jukebox, she'd say, this is for Little Joe at the Torch, and she'd play a Spike Jones song. Meantime, I had my drums all packed up in the back room of the bar, and I had a practice pad. So when she would play the records, I'd go in the back and practice with my pad, Spike Jones records. So this went on for about 3 months, 3 or 4 months. In the meantime, I met Herb, and Herb tells a story. I went and knocked on his door. He said, what are you doing in California? I said, I came up to join Spike Jones. He said, did he give you a contract? I said, no. He said, how can you come out like this? So I kept in touch with Herb. So then I get a call from Spike Jones. I get a call one day. I'd gone out to Beverly Hills, and I met his wife at that time, and his daughter Linda. And I told him where I was, and so then I get a call one day. Hi, Joe, this is Spike. I said, yeah, hi, Spike. He says, we're having a rehearsal out at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. He said, I'd like to come out there and bring your drums. I'd like to hear you play. Because he had never heard me play drums. All he heard me do was voices and effects. Okay, so my friend Joe drives me out to the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, and there's the band all setting up. Mickey Katz was playing clarinet, and Red Eagle was just leaving the band, and Doodles Weaver was coming in to do some stuff. And so I set my drums up, and they're auditioning an act that came out to do a dance in gold paint. And they had an arrangement for a 14-piece band with violins and all that. So they passed out the arrangements, and Spike got a Dixieland band, 7-piece Dixieland band. So we started playing the music, and it sounded horrible, but it was meant for violins and all that. So I thought to myself, when you come to the big band, you start playing everything is perfect. It's just like the Army. It's just like playing for a USO show. I said, Joe, relax, and just be yourself. So I felt better. I thought, I'm not the only guy that felt like things were being goofed up. So anyway, we got rid of the act, and now we start rehearsing, doing a couple numbers that Spike Jones numbers with the new guys. Doodles Weaver was going to take Red Eagle's place, and Dick Morgan was going to do a number that Red did. So I'm sitting there and I'm playing these things, and I'm playing them without music. I'm just playing them from memory that I heard when I played with the record. So Spike's looking at me and looking at me. So we get through with the little rehearsal, and we go to the men's room. I always tell the story. Here we are, sharing urinals, standing there. And Spike said, "Hey Joe," he said, "I suggest you get yourself a couple bigger cymbals for your sock cymbal, your hi-hat." So I said, "Why, have I got the job?" He said, "No," but he said, "I'll talk to you about that." So then we go out. He said, "But I want you to, So he said, like to hear you play some dance work." He heard me play the sticker stuff. He said, "I'd like to hear you play some dance work." He said, "We're doing a dance at the Coronado Del Mar Country Club, in Del Mar, across the bay." So he says, "We're leaving from the Palladium parking lot Saturday at 2 o'clock. I said, "Be there." So I get down, and I get to the parking lot, and I get on the bus with the guys. Now musicians are the same like cartoons. They're the same all over. They're screwy guys, crazy guys. So they get out, and they're having fun, joking around. And I fit right in with them. I get a couple of good zingers out, a couple of gags. And I felt right at home. They made me feel right at home. So we get out to the Del Mar Country Club, and Dick Peterson is playing drums, and it's for the Standard Oil Company, having a big formal affair, black tie, and remember Richard, is it Gargan, the actor? Who lost his voice later on? William Gargan. He lost his voice. He was the MC, and so what they did, they had They had dancing for about an hour, then Spike did a half hour, or about an hour show, and then they had another half hour of dancing. And Spike said, he used to laugh, he says, those guys that stand there, he says, they were so uptight that they could hardly keep them laughing when we did our show, you know. So now, you got enough time there? I go on for days. So they said they're doing the dance now. So Spike says, Joe, I'd like to hear you play some dance work. So I get in, and I'm sitting on the drums now, and I've never seen any music before. I'm studying for the first time. So he kills out 3 tunes. So we play the first 3 tunes, and I remember George Rock, right, like that to me, and Dick Morgan, stuff like that, because I've got a beat. I got a jazz beat and a Dixieland beat. I'll put it to anybody.